unless there's any changes to it. When we call each item, we ask the applicant to come up to the desk up here and to use the microphones, because that is our record of the hearing, is the recording from those microphones. It's also hard to hear in here, so using those microphones is important. There's also a clipboard there, so anybody participating or interested in getting party status or being informed of different items on the agenda should sign in on that clipboard there at some point during the meeting. We have, on the agenda, we have a couple of board members out right now, one a little late, so we're going to adjust the agenda slightly and move under public hearings the first item, which is 110 Riverside. We're going to move that to the end of the agenda. I just would rather have more people here for that item when it happens. It's a short agenda. Communications, we have several communications on 110 Riverside that we will, I guess, discuss once we get to that item. We have minutes from, some minutes here, November 6th. So if anybody has any comments on that, please let me know. Okay, and then that's it. Then we have our consent agenda. The first item on the consent agenda is 80 Colchester Avenue, change of use to medical office. Is the applicant here? Do you want to come up? So this is on the consent agenda, which, if it's okay with you, we would move towards approving it. Have you seen the staff's comments and recommendations? Sure. They're okay with you? Does anybody on the board have any issue with treating this as consent? No. Does anybody in the public have any questions or issues with 80 Colchester Avenue regarding the change of use to medical office? No? Okay. Does somebody want to make a motion on 80 Colchester Avenue?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Pardon?
I'll second.
Let me make the motion. And I'd move to approve the application and adopt staff findings and recommendations.
I'll second
Robbie
that.
seconds. All in favor? Opposed? That's it.
That was easy.
Good to
Thank
go.
you.
The next item we're going to move to is 747 Pine Street, which is expansion of warehouse retail into vacant unit, former fitness gym. This is on the public hearing. This was recommended for consent.
It was recommended for consent.
It was recommended for consent. I think it's on the public hearing. We're going to treat it as a public hearing. I think it'll be easier that way. So can I have anybody who's going to testify on 747 Pine Street raise your right hand? Is anybody in the public speaking on this? No. Keep your hand up. Do you swear to tell the truth and whole truth under pain and penalty of perjury? I do. I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to it. I had one comment, and that is, at least in the plans that I saw online, there was no overall site plan submitted as part of the...
That's correct. There was a partial site plan, but
Right.
not an overall site plan.
And we're asked to recognize the 14 spaces for the gym, and they're not on anything that we can see, other than go to Google Earth.
Just the count.
Huh?
The overall count was not sufficient for you, and you want to be able to see them.
We just wanted to see them. So, I mean, so that's the only question I suggest I would have, is to submit an overall site plan that shows those parking spaces that are approved. I don't see, I could see it on Google Earth, but it seems to me it should be part of the submittal. Other than that, I didn't have any questions on this. I don't know if there's anything you want to add or speak about. This you're advertising here, I don't know.
No, but I can say that there is sufficient parking for the 14 spaces.
I understand that
Yes,
that's the
under
case.
penalty of perjury, I will attest that.
Yeah. Any questions from the board on this?
Nope.
Then we'll deliberate at some point, but that's the only thing I'm going to add to the findings, is to ask for that site plan. Other
The staff could provide that to you,
Good.
Mr. Chair. It's in the previous application and approval.
Okay, so then we will have everything we need.
Great, look forward to it.
So I will close the public hearing on this one.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much. You have to sign in, we're good.
The next item is 65 Oak Ledge. Is the applicant here for that? Okay. And this is a request for construction on Saturdays regarding condition 3 in the original permit. And so I'll ask if the applicant, and I think there's people from the public who wish to speak on this, to raise your right hand. And do you swear to tell the truth and whole truth under pain and penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay. So if you can introduce yourself.
Sure.
And perhaps explain what it is you're looking to do on Saturdays.
Yep. My name is Benjamin Roll. I'm a project manager and vice president of construction with Reart Company. So we're the general contractor on the project. The hope is that we're in close proximity to several neighbors, and over the course of the winter, we're hoping to work some Saturdays so that we can offset time that would be used in the summer. So the idea being that if we can complete all the building cladding in the winter, we can move into site work, landscaping and such as early as possible in the spring, and hopefully limit additional summer work. So that's kind of the idea here.
So you'll be doing outside siding and
That's
trim?
correct. Yeah, that's correct. Primarily siding, possibly some roofing, those sort of
Getting
things.
material deliveries?
Not likely on Saturday. I mean, maybe small pickup trucks or a small box truck, but certainly nothing major I would expect. We can coordinate that during the week if need be.
So you want to start work at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning?
Yep, so we proposed 8 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. So kind of reduced hours on Saturdays. Hopefully that strikes a balance with the neighbors. It's respectful and works for them.
How important is it for you to start at 8? Do you have some flexibility in the morning time?
We do. Our normal work hours Monday through Friday are 7 to 5, which we've been adhering to. Obviously the 8 to 2:30 is sort of reduced work hours for us anyway, so if we were to start later, I'd ask to go a little bit longer in the day, so if possible. Otherwise, if the day starts getting too much shorter, it's probably not worth the time to come in to do that, but I'll defer to you guys.
When do you anticipate the project to be finished?
The project right now is scheduled to be complete in September of next year.
Is that inclusive of being allowed to work on Saturdays?
Like I said before, I think that overall we're on track to meet that end date. Really the goal is that by working Saturdays, if we look at working Saturdays from now until, say, May, you're looking at 4 or 5 months of work, and if you add those days up, it equates to roughly a month of work. So the hope is that if we complete the siding work over the course of the winter, and we're ready to go as soon as weather permits for landscaping and the final site improvements, that we can complete that earlier in the summer and then provide a longer period of remaining summer months for the neighbors to have sort of quiet time. So the more work we can accomplish this winter when people's windows are closed and they're inside primarily, the hope is that there's less work next summer when people have the windows open and they're out and about outside.
Typically, though, I think the weekend work is seen as happening inside and quieter, not
Yeah.
exterior.
And there certainly is a lot of interior work that's going on. The exterior package of this home is very, very detailed, and it's going to take quite a bit of effort. So we're expecting it to take quite a while to complete the siding package on this.
And maybe I overlooked this. What do you anticipate the parking needs on Saturday are? People there, and where would they park?
Yep, great question. So it'll be a reduced number of workers on the weekend. We have had some challenges with parking so far, just the size of the lot. We have a bit of capacity on site, I'd say, for probably 10 to 15 vehicles on site. So I would say that all work on Saturday, the parking will be on site, and that won't be a challenge. During the weekday, we have run into some instances where there are some challenges, and we're asking people to either commute or they park up on the main street before they enter the Oak Ledge Drive area.
Okay, that leads into my next question. Would there be an alternative parking area for people to meet and maybe commute over together?
I think we could arrange that. I don't think it'll become necessary. I think everyone will be able to park on site. I don't expect any overflow parking on a Saturday.
Okay.
Is there more of a concern regarding that, or?
Well, I'm just thinking about what the neighbors are thinking with a bunch of people parking on a Saturday when
Yeah,
that's probably the time they get together with other people and hope for some availability to park.
Yeah, and to clarify, so the site right now has a perimeter fence around most of it, except the water side. We have a gate that we lock off hours, so the gate's open, people pull into the site, and they park on the site within that fenced area, so.
Okay. Is that site occupied right now, or is it unoccupied?
It is unoccupied.
Unoccupied, okay.
This is a question for staff. On Saturdays, what has the board typically allowed for the like upper range of hours is for work and?
Well, I mean, typically, we have no way to track for typically. I provided 3 project examples in the staff memo. Cambrian Rise out on North Avenue is interior work. On Saturdays, Grove Street, the SD Ireland redevelopment was not limited that way, but it was 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., which has neighboring residences. And 194 St. Paul Street, formerly known as Eagles Landing, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., which also has nearby residences.
Typically larger projects, though?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's sort of the quirky thing here, right? I mean, most zoning permits don't have construction hour limits outside of the noise ordinance, but this happened to be a conditional use because of the accessory dwelling unit, and so that became a criterion. So yeah, it is typically larger projects because typically it's the larger that trigger that.
There's a couple of neighbors that have, I think, want to make some comments, so maybe you could step aside and have them
Absolutely.
come up and they could, I think somebody wanted to make some comments, so. Just introduce yourself and see what you have to say.
Hi, my name is Kath Lang. I
And
live
you
at
got to keep the
55.
microphone closer to you.
My name is Kath Lang. I live at 55 Oak Ledge Drive. There's a couple of things that we informed the DRB about last night through an email. Some of you, not all of you, not all of your emails
I
are on
actually
the
don't
website.
think that that's,
Well, there's a couple of things that haven't been mentioned that are glaringly.
yeah, we haven't, that's not something that we would accept.
Okay, well,
So you can't really send it to.
currently what I'm going to say then is that they have been working at this site on Saturdays since the spring. So we've had 4 to 5 months of work without a permit, is number one. The second point is that the parking and all this is all secondary. It's the noise. Brad, I believe you were the architect who'd helped design the Babbitt's home that we purchased.
Oh, many years ago.
55 Oak Ledge Drive. So you understand how small and quiet the neighborhood is. We've had drilling, we've had blasting, we've had heavy machinery beeping incessantly, and we have had, it's a house, that is a home that is at least 2.5 times the size of anything else around it that was approved by the DRB. So this has been happening, and at the same time, we've had constructions on Saturdays that what we understand is unlawful, as it's a violation of their construction permit. And that every Saturday, most of the Saturdays, from the beginning of the spring till the end of the summer, they were working. We have a compromise to propose, and the compromise is work on Saturdays until the end of the winter, until the 31st of March. And as of the spring, please don't work in the spring and the summer next year on Saturdays. On top of everything else, it is just, it comes across as extremely unneighborly in a neighborhood that has always been very neighborly.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Suzanne Garrity, and I'm at 40 Oakledge Drive. So I abut the parking pad. So I appreciate your questions about parking because they do pull in at 6:20 every morning with headlights right shining in our living room. My husband counts, and most days there's 19 trucks pulling in. So it is an impact for sure. I just want to reiterate that we've had to endure 6 a.m. start times on the weekends. I walked over to the construction site in my pajamas and said, "Really, guys? Is this legal?" And they say, "Oh, yes, ma'am. We have a permit. Yes, ma'am." That's happened more than once. Finally, and as Kath mentioned, on the weekends, they worked all Saturdays all throughout the summer. They ensured us that they had a permit. They've basically been acting with impunity, frankly. Recently, they worked till 10:30 at night. I again walked over there at 9 o'clock. I'm trying to get my kids in bed. And they said, "Sorry, we can't do anything about it. We have a permit, blah, blah, blah." So I finally got smart and went into the code enforcement office, and the nice people there said, "No, they don't. They can't work that late. They can't work on Saturdays." I don't know why I didn't think to look into it earlier. And the gentleman I spoke with, I can't recall his name, but he assured me that this was a legally binding contract, which they would have signed, so they would have known that they couldn't work on Saturdays. So anyway, we're beyond that. They're no longer working on Saturdays. It's wonderful. And Ben's been great. If the guys have to stay late, he asked permission, and we're like, "Yep, that's fine." I guess what I'm asking is, I don't want to penalize the new owners. I know they're eager to get into their house. I don't want to penalize the construction company, but please know that Saturdays are disruptive. My ask would be that you consider limiting it to inside work or quiet work. Let me tell you, when you've been listening to beeping trucks from 7 a.m. till 10:30 at night, it would drive anyone crazy. Again, that hasn't happened all the time, of course, but it definitely wears on you after a while. So again, my ask would be either limiting it to inside work or quiet outside work, or some sort of compromise. Because anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you for your consideration.
Any questions for the neighbors here?
No questions for the neighbors. I have another question, though, for the
Great.
applicant.
I have a question for the neighbors. Do either of you have any objection or want to comment on the proposed time hours between 8 to 2:30 that the applicant has proposed?
The only objection I would have is that it would not happen over the spring and the summer.
But you're okay with the 8 a.m. start time?
During the winter, yeah, until the 31st of March, 2020.
And I'm okay with that. I would ask that it's no loud outdoor work, which I imagine they wouldn't be anyway, right? I would assume, being winter and all, but
People work in the cold.
True.
They do.
Yeah, we do,
this is true.
but not on Saturdays.
Okay. Thank you. And if the applicant come back up, we can.
So my question is, are you seeking permission to work on Saturdays because you were working on Saturdays and realized that you needed permission to be working on Saturdays?
Yeah, there's two parts of that. So one part is that we mistakenly thought that we had approval to work on Saturdays through communication with various people, but later found out that we did not have formal approval, which as soon as we realized that we had not met the permit requirements for that approval, we ceased work on Saturdays, which happened probably, 4 weeks ago or so, plus or minus. So since that time, we haven't worked Saturdays. The second part of that is that our hope is, like I said earlier, by working the weekends over the course of the winter, that we can pick up some time and basically move that portion of the work, the exterior portion of the work forward, so that we can accomplish some of that outside work during the winter months when people are inside, as opposed to during the summer months when people are outside. So the hope is that we can offset and provide the neighbors with a little bit more summertime noise-free, so to speak.
And you heard the neighbors' concern about working past the allowable hours?
Yep, I did.
Is there a plan in place to avoid that in the future?
Yeah, I think for the most part, we've addressed that. There have been some shortfalls, I'll admit. There's a couple cases where we had people that came in shortly before 7 that started whatever. I was not aware of vehicles pulling in and disturbing Mrs. Garrity and her family, so I'll look into addressing that. Certainly I can understand lights and that sort of thing before 7, so I will look into that as a concern. No one should be working before 7 or after 5 during the week, and I think we've made progress in addressing that. One of the comments was about a contractor working till 9:30 or 10 o'clock on a weekday, and there was a lot of correspondence back and forth about that specific incident. Long story short, there was a utility company that was not a subcontractor to us, and us as a contractor and the neighbors all got some differing information, but long story short on that is that I can guarantee that will not happen again. So we'll take whatever means necessary to remove them from site, but from our perspective, they were not cooperative and we could not get them to stop at the time, but we've learned how, I think we've figured out a way to address that, but that specific circumstance is highly unlikely to happen again, but if something like that were to come about, we would know how to address it now, so.
And what were your thoughts on the compromise of Saturdays in the winter only?
I think that's reasonable. I think that meets the goal of what we're trying to accomplish by performing some of this exterior work during the winter months and moving that forward. So I'm good with that. I accept that.
When you do the siding, do you use a lull or something like that as a lift?
For the siding work itself?
Yeah.
I am not sure.
Asking because I think they beep when they back up.
They might,
And
yeah.
I'm thinking about those kinds of things, material deliveries.
Yeah.
That kind of equipment on site, and whether we would, maybe restrict that use on a Saturday.
Yeah, that's understandable. I suspect that they wouldn't need forklifts much, if at all, on a Saturday, and I think we could work around that.
Just go
if that was
forward
required.
around, they would be
Yeah,
okay.
don't back up, exactly.
And if the hours were 8 to 2:30, in your mind, would that mean people show up at 8 or people show up at 7 and begin work at 8?
In my mind, they would show up, shortly before 8 to begin work at 8, but no sooner than 8.
You heard the concern about lights in the room early in the morning?
I did, yeah, and obviously, from thinking about it, I'm sure we have crew members that show up before 8 o'clock or before 7 o'clock to, be ready to start at 7 o'clock. So knowing that that's a concern for our neighbors, we'll look into figuring out how to, if we can address that some way.
If it meant the difference between not working on Saturdays and working on Saturdays, would it make more sense to show up at 8 o'clock?
It's just, I don't think it'll make too much of a difference. If we need to show up at 8, we could probably accommodate that. It's just, yeah, like I said earlier, it's just already a short day, so I hate to limit that too much further.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah. So I heard one of the neighbors say that they heard blasting, and I was curious about the status of excavation activities at this
Sure.
point in time, whether you're finished with excavation activities and it's all structural, or
Yep.
is there more excavation going on?
Yeah, great question. So the project as a whole is a bit challenging from the standpoint that the first thing we did on site was we had to go and blast for the foundation. So our introduction to the neighborhood, unfortunately, was through blasting, and we started as far away from the neighboring property as possible, but as the progress and the ending of the blasting was right against their property line, essentially. So unfortunately, that was quite a bit of impact to 55 Oak Ledge, and we certainly recognize that. The other part of this project that's challenging is it's entirely on geothermal heat system, which requires 12 wells, and each well is 500 feet deep. At this point, we've installed 4 of the 12. We haven't coordinated the other 8 wells. Each one takes approximately a day and a half to do, but it's a fairly sizable drill rig, and that's also a bit of an impact. The neighbors have asked me to look into how we address noise mitigation for that. It's a huge, obviously that's a huge drill rig, and I'm not sure the answer to that yet. We're still trying to figure out how best to address that. So we're still working on that issue, but that is an impact for sure, and that would not be a weekend kind of thing. The civil work that's remaining is pretty minor. It's site grading, probably some more fill, obviously the landscaping, so topsoil, seed, plantings, that kind of stuff. As far as civil work, I think there's one more stormwater catch basin to put in on site, but it's pretty minor. So, does that answer your question?
Okay, I think with that, we'll close the hearing, and we'll see if we deliberate at the end of the meeting or not. We'll determine that then. Thanks, everybody, for participating. So we have one other item on our agenda, which is 110 Riverside Drive.
You did 747.
Yeah.
Flying through.
We're
Was
ready.
that on consent or was there?
No, that was not. We have to vote on it.
I can't vote on it because I wasn't here also.
It's pretty straightforward. It was recommended for you.
Yeah, I saw that. That's why I was wondering if
Yeah.
you moved it there.
Okay, can I have anybody who's going to speak on this project, I should swear you in, do you want to raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth and whole truth on the pain and penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay. If you want to introduce yourselves, it's obviously, we've seen this before, but this is, a lot of people on the board have not seen it, so I think it's really looking at it as a new project. There are some questions that we may have to break it down to different pieces with the shoring issue and the building issue and the site issue. So wherever you want to start on it.
Okay. My name is Steve Gale, the G4 Design. We're the architectural company for this project. Like it says in the staff reports, the permit was approved in July of 2013. We went through, I think, 2 extensions, and then the permit expired. So that's why we are back here to come in front of the DRB again. There's nothing changed since that permit was approved. Right now, the building footprint, to talk about the building itself, the building footprint is about 19,000 square feet per floor. There's 57 units. We have 27 one-beds and 32 beds. We have, right now we have, I think 48 or 49 total interior parking, about 12 exterior parking spaces shown on the site plan. We have, right now the building will be 4 stories. We have a combination of brick veneer, vertical metal siding, of the areas that are exposed to Riverside Avenue, and in the back of the building we have vinyl siding. We have, for parking, bike parking, we meet requirements for bike parking. We have some parking, long-term storage parking inside the garage, parking garage, and we have some short-term out by the entryway for short-term parking. Kind of brief the project. We have double hung windows, vinyl double hung windows. We have recessed decks, which are going to be made out of metal. As you can see from the renderings, and the site's can be massively improved from what it is now. Right now, it's just a storage salvage yard used for storage of cars and basic storage. So the owner, of course, is willing to clean up the site.
Can you go, I mean, that's one of the big questions on the site is the potential phase 2 assessment of the property.
Yep.
And right now, that's sort of a bugaboo in the middle of your process where you can't really come up with a schedule because you have to do some more assessment before you know what you have to do and how you're going to fit that into your timeline. Can you address that?
We have phase 1's done. Phase 1 right now, what phase 1 consists of is a building review, doc review. So pretty much phase 1 is just a visual review of the site. And then a documentation review. They go back and check the records of the existing site. Was there any contamination, any records during phase 1? So that's phase 1 is done. Phase 2, the owner doesn't want to do phase 2 until the city approves it, because what's involved in phase 2 is Ventura Group is going to do borings. They're going to do monitoring wells and sample groundwater. And also they need to demo the building to see if there's any tanks, buried tanks. And that, of course, is going to cost some money to do that. So the owner was willing to do that, but he wants to wait. He doesn't want to do it, and then the DRB doesn't approve it and spend that money to have phase 2 done. So he wants to do, if he wants to do phase 2, first thing is do is phase 2 if the city approves it. That's the first thing he's going to do is phase 2.
Jeremy, I saw your memo, and if I read your memo correctly, your suggestion was a condition could be Phase 2 must be completed after demolition of the building.
That seems reasonable.
Because I think if I'm understanding, you'd have to do site assessment under the building anyway.
Correct.
You're not going to have matching footprints, so you need to check, you need to do some boring under where the existing building and whatnot is to confirm migration or those sorts of things.
That's correct. And I didn't introduce myself. Jeremy Matoski with Trudell Consulting Engineers. I'm the civil engineer for this project. Abby Derry has been my senior project manager on that and has been working with Mary for quite some time on the process. But I'm here tonight to answer any site civil related questions. And yeah, as I read the staff report, I think my sense was that we could have an affirmative finding with conditions related to the Phase 2 work being done after the demolition of the building, but obviously prior to it. There needs to be some sort of clearance from the state and then concurrence with the city that this construction can commence on the new project. So I think that's our approach, and it seems a reasonable one to me because, again, if we did it now, we wouldn't be able to drill inside the building. We have to tear the building down to get in there and check underneath the foundation anyway. So the sequencing would be demolition, do a full analysis, and make sure there's nothing hazardous. If there is, it'll get cleaned up, and then move forward with the construction of the project.
Just want to confirm one thing. Demolition of the building there's no basement, there's no excavation, there's no basement of that building. So demolition of the building doesn't require any subsurface excavation.
There's probably shallow foundations, frost walls or something. I don't know much about that other than it's a garage, so it's a slab. And I understand that it was an auto facility, so it probably has some pits where they typically have some concrete pits that they use for servicing vehicles. So it's conceivable that there could be some minor excavation associated with removing existing foundations.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry, on the plans too, and identified by state authorities, they believe there still may be some underground storage tanks there that there's an interest in removing. So that would require excavation if that's identified.
That's true. That would be part of the investigation. And
I think the anticipation is that Phase 2 will yield the requirement of some remediation to happen, right? I mean,
Yes.
There's a high probability of that.
Yeah.
And that's,
But what we're asking, we can't obviously,
Right.
we're asking for that as a condition of approval as opposed to requiring that we do it before we show up and secure our final site plan approval. And one clarification before we get in too far into the rest of the staff report, just so that the DRB obviously is aware, there was a stipulation agreement, a settlement associated with this project related to the expiration dates, and that, as I understand it, the project would be essentially unchanged, and the rules that would govern the review would be essentially unchanged as well. In a few instances, we can talk about more specifically, it seems like the findings have changed from what we had previously without the project changing, or at least the recommendation from staff at that point. So,
Can you highlight that for me?
what's that?
Can you highlight where that is, Jeremy?
The stipulation agreement?
No, you just said some things had changed.
So, for example, I was comparing the staff report from 2013, and we had affirmative findings with conditions related to slope issues and contamination issues, and now the staff report reads no findings possible, and so I'm trying to put that in context with the agreement that we had with the city to come here tonight.
well, I think to me, there's some confusion about the shoring and how the bank behind, and I think that was being discussed before. I'm concerned that there's really no sections being submitted showing the site and what's happening behind where the shoring is going on, and some of it is the shoring design indicates it's 12 inches off of the property line. The site plans seem to show the shoring, in some cases, right on the property line.
Sure.
And so that
We can clarify some of that tonight for sure, Brad.
Yeah.
So we have Eric Goddard here from Knight Consulting Engineers. He did an analysis of this back in 2012 and recommended some shoring options at that time. And then, based on staff comments, we brought him back and took a closer look at that. And we actually do, I think they're in your packet, we have the elevation drawings. Have you seen those?
The elevation of the shoring.
The elevation of the shoring, correct.
What that doesn't show is what is happening on the upside of that where the neighboring property is.
Yep.
And is some safety requirement, a railing or something required, because I believe there's a big drop in some cases over there.
Yes, that is true.
And that's
So-
not clear on anything I've seen.
Okay, that's a good point. If there's a railing requirement at the top of a sheet pile wall, then obviously that needs to be put in there.
Yeah.
So I'll let Eric speak for what he did, if you want to talk about that now. We've made some headway on this, and I think there was some confusion about, in the report, maybe it was in the city engineer's comments about we don't know where the property lines are. That's not true. We have a detailed survey of the property. So we can be very clear about, when time comes, where the sheet piles go in relationship to the property lines. And if tiebacks are required, we have secured permission from the neighbor to...
That's something we just got
Correct.
today, right?
Yep.
Is Neighbor's permission to.
The neighbor's permission, and we'll secure permanent easements to, if necessary, to deal with the tiebacks that might cross the property line.
And the other thing, and maybe the representative from Knight may be able to address this, the report that we have in our packet is noted as preliminary.
Correct.
And that may be appropriate.
Let's get Eric up
Yeah,
here to talk
okay.
about shoring.
You can pull up another chair, I mean.
Yeah, just pull a chair up. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Eric Goddard from Knight Consulting Engineers. Our firm did the geotechnical work for the project.
And again, it's listed as preliminary, but I assume that that's, again, waiting for this approval so that you can finalize that, is that?
Yes, the bulk of the engineering has been completed, and that involves slope analysis to see what's needed to hold back the slope when we cut the bottom away. And the details of the tiebacks are difficult for us to show because that's typically a performance spec item that the installer typically designs that system based upon the loading requirements that we have. And if you look on our elevation views, we have a whole bunch of tiebacks shown with 100 kip loads, 400 kip loads, things like that. So we give them the load requirements, and then they typically design the anchor system.
Do you have to do more soil testing to confirm all that? Or have you done enough soil testing?
No, the soil testing is done. The slope analysis to figure out what we need is done. The details of the design of the anchor system is basically what the installer would provide. It's kind of a design build item. It's similar to, I don't know if any of you were around when Salmon Run was done with those galvanized soldier beams that was put up, and Schnabel came in and did tiebacks. We basically put out a performance spec as to this is the loading in each section we need. You come up with the anchor system, and that's how it was bid. And we got a number of bids and went with the.
Does a system like that have drainage behind it?
No, behind the sheeting.
For subsurface drainage?
No, other than we have weep holes through the sheeting
Oh, okay.
to allow the groundwater to flow through.
Yep. Okay. And I guess at some point, whether it's Trudell or Knight would provide those sections to understand what's happening on the grade above the project.
Yeah, we have those built into the model, and I actually have CAD representations of those sections.
Yeah.
So it's easy to generate.
Yeah.
And as condition was written in the staff report, I think it's essentially provide those final plans as best we can with Knight's input, and I think that's a reasonable condition, and we can provide that as a condition of approval. I think it's number 5 in the proposed conditions. More highly articulated plans generated by the geotechnical structural engineer. And can you clarify, are you one or both of those?
I'm both.
That's what I
I'm
thought.
actually a civil, structural, and geotechnical engineer. So.
Relative to the proposed shoring and wall anchors submitted to the city engineer for for review prior to redevelopment. And then obviously Trudell would do the property boundary monumentation piece of that to make sure we put the wall in the right place. And if there's a life safety issue related to a railing, that would be added
Yeah,
to the top.
we can add that.
Can the sheets just be left high so that they serve as their own wall?
You could do that, or you could do something more aesthetic, there's a number of options, a chain link fence, a railing, extending the sheets.
And it's going to depend on what it looks like from above, from the neighboring property.
My recollection, it's a forested slope, so I don't know that there's any aesthetic concerns from that side. But.
Just to continue on the shoring issue, there's one point where the shoring is shown and there's a block wall in front of it. Is that? Okay, because it was called out on one of the plans as a block wall in front of the shoring.
The original site plan that Trudell prepared indicated a block wall or similar, because we didn't know what the final solution was going to be. When we brought in Knights, that's when the sheet pile option became.
But I think that's still showing on your plan as a block wall in front on that same shape.
Correct. And we can, as a condition of approval, we can update that to show a sheet pile wall once we get the final layout from Knights.
As long as we're on the site. Any other site-related questions, as long as we're talking about that? I had one, there was a comment from DPW about the stair on the east side.
Yeah, can we talk about that one?
Yeah, I was just confused as to where it was.
So I do have a site, you guys have the site plans, right?
Yeah.
This was one of those, I scratched my head a little bit too, just in relationship to, this was reviewed and approved previously. And the original design included a staircase right off the main entrance sidewalk that lines up with the crosswalk.
Yeah.
And then due to the handicap accessible route, we have an alternate route that's a little bit more circuitous but gets you the necessary grade to achieve ADA compliance. That more recent staff Public Works comment was that we only have one of these, but in my experience, having both a stair and a accessible ramp is very common. We certainly could eliminate the staircase and just have the accessible route, but people...
Is the staircase you're referring to the one that's...
It's this one here, Brad, right in front of the crosswalk.
Oh, that little set of stairs there.
That's my understanding.
That's the only stairs I see relevant.
Well, there's, yeah.
And there is a staircase to the,
Oh, the
to
jog
the
there, right?
eastern entrance.
So they wanted to slope it with, and...
Yeah, but we already had an accessible route, so, again, we did some...
It's, I mean, the 8.3%, that's what they were...
That's a 1 in 12.
1 in 12.
That's not, it's maximum slope under 88.
So you need a railing with that.
But you still need a railing, and so, again, I feel like the design that we had before that was reviewed and approved meets both the function of the site with stairs adjacent to the sidewalk, and then an accessible route for those who need it. I believe that one was maxed out at a 5% grade, so we didn't have railings.
Yeah. The thing that it does by eliminating that is the intent of ADA is that the main entrance is accessible. And by eliminating the stairs and making that 8.3%, you really get from the crosswalk, you go right into the building rather than having to go around.
I understand that.
So it works either way from...
We could relook at it, and maybe with Steve's help, we can, I don't know if we'd have to deal with what's going on in the inside there, but, if ultimately we'll agree with whatever conditions issued.
Okay.
I didn't have a problem per se with what we had approved before, neither did Public Works the last time, but now they're raising that issue, and so happy to address it if we have to. And similarly, while we're talking about site plan issues, we had a dumpster along the eastern boundary, previously approved again, and now that issue, and there was affirmative findings in the last approval, and now there's an issue where that's no longer deemed accessible or acceptable. So I wasn't exactly sure why, but
It's in the setback.
right. But there was a comment in the previous approval that that was okay. So that's why I'm confused that now it's not. But regardless of that, we could flip that and move it closer to the building if we had to.
In those
And then
parking
we'll
spaces.
probably put parking there instead. So those are the two site plan changes that we've been discussing. And again, both of those are acceptable to us as conditions of approval.
Can I ask you a question about the traffic generation?
Sure.
There was a staff comment about a discrepancy, and I read your memo about the ITE manual changing codes.
Correct.
Can you just explain that to me?
Yes, certainly. So we had earlier on kind of pushed pretty hard not to update the traffic report. The thinking being the building's the same building. Obviously, there's been a little bit of traffic increase since then, but really to spare the owner the expense of going through the exercise more than anything. But lo and behold, Public Works wouldn't relent, so we went forward and did the new traffic study. And the previous study was done under the 9th edition of the ITE manual, and the new one is under the current 10th edition. And ITE has refined their land use codes for apartment buildings, and they no longer group them together as generically all apartment buildings, and they've more granularly indicated that there are low, mid, and high-rise apartment buildings, and they clearly define what those all are. So the net outcome of that is actually that, statistically speaking, this building, under the same number of units under the old manual and the new manual, it generates less traffic. So those updated numbers are correct, and those are the ones that were used in the new analysis that Public Works, I believe, had an opportunity to look at.
Okay.
But that was the only difference. And then, again, there's a mistake on C201 where we forgot to update the chart on
The reference.
so that should be updated as a condition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I wonder if you would mind if we took a short, not really a break, but I know that Councilor Busher is here, and there's another meeting that
She does, and she already.
that the councilor would like to get to. And maybe you have some comments you would like to make now, so that you could attend the other meeting? Thank you.
Finance Committee? Finance Committee? Oh.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for allowing me to make these comments before I think you're finished making your comments. My name is Sharon Busher. I live in Ward 1, and I'm the city councilor representing that ward. And I saw this project the first time through and really weighed in on a number of items. One of the things that was really important for me was the fact that the individuals who lived here would have access to the bus, trying to promote public transportation, also trying to figure out how they could cross Riverside Avenue. A number of those things have been addressed in this plan. One of the things that I picked up before my main comment was that talked about, I've had the privilege now of looking at a number of rental properties, and this talks about the Design Advisory Board apparently said from a use standpoint, the isolated location of the bike storage facility is not commensurate with the anticipated need and likely use of the facilities. So I don't know if that has been remedied. It's still in your packet, but I think those are minor tweaks that potentially could be looked at to make that better if possible. But the real reason I'm here has to do with the change that occurred between the original review and this current review. There was a fair amount of development that went on Colchester Avenue above the bank that it abuts the back of this property. And in that development, there was significant tree removal. And so my concern became the stability of the bank. I was also around, gray hair, when Salmon Run was developed, and there was really a lot of attention paid to the fact that the bank was stable and then it wasn't stable after the construction, and there were real problems with that. So I am really here for safety, safety for construction, for the people doing the work down below, and for the properties that have now been constructed on the top of Colchester Avenue. Certainly that's a factor, and then finally, when the development is finished, you want it to be safe, and you don't want that bank to be sliding after the development's finished. Once again, the houses on top of Colchester Avenue, and then the people living below. I read the information from DPW saying that in their opinion, they felt further evaluation and assessment is required from a geotechnical, environmental, and structural engineering standpoint. My understanding, although the acoustics in this room are really hard, my understanding is the individual is both geotechnical and structural engineer. And so I think that meets that spirit, although I don't know whether, and also prior to the meeting, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. He also told me that he was involved in trying to work on the remedy for Salmon Run, correct? Yes, so he does have some familiarity with the bank and the stabilization of it in that section, although that bank runs from Trinity College all the way over to where you get to the intersection, basically, of Barrett and Colchester and, the bridge, the Winooski Bridge. And I'm sure the topography and the runoff that impacts that bank is different in each section, so I can't attest to the fact that Salmon Run's bank is identical to the bank that is behind this property, although in similar locations. So I'm just hoping that we're really confident that we've addressed this problem and that it will be safe for everybody. And those are my comments. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So if you want to come back up, I appreciate taking that moment to do that. I think obviously there are questions that have to do with the bank and shoring, and that I think we all feel the need to see a little bit more information on that to understand not just on the property, but above the property and what's happening. I was just looking at the grading, and it's almost 100 feet higher when you get to Colchester Avenue.
Yes, and I hope to have something a little more descriptive to show the profile all the way up to the top of the bank and the area that we're impacting and the relative factors of safety. Basically, we will either be maintaining or improving the factor of safety. We have certain standards we need because of the building. Typically a 1.3 factor safety during construction. When we're done at 1.5. The 1.5 would be better than what they have now in some areas. There's some areas that we won't be impacted because the shoring doesn't affect those parts of the slope. But typically we will be keeping it as is for factor safety or making it better with our design guidelines of 1.3 and 1.5 during construction and after construction.
Okay.
And that's a measure of slope stability, is that correct?
It's a factor safety. You calculate, you basically look at the forces you need to keep it from sliding when it's right on the verge, and then you have either an added 30% or 50% for restraint. And those are typical standards that are used in the industry.
And you think that's, and you're confident that the tieback and shoring proposal is within those ranges?
Yes, we looked at both, and we took the one that governed.
Okay. There's other questions on the site at the moment.
I have a question for staff. Just curious, has the applicant provided either in 2013 or now calculations for post-construction stormwater management?
I'm sorry, can you speak into the microphone?
Sure. Has the applicant provided at any point, 2013 or now, calculations for post-construction stormwater management?
They did have approved plans in 2013. I have connected with the stormwater program engineers, they believe absent any significant changes in the plans that those approvals would remain.
Thanks.
Did they take into account the different retainage that's being used on the back of the property? That now it's piles as opposed to concrete block or anything like that? Does that affect them?
I've had no communication with the engineering staff that suggests one way or another. I reached out to them again yesterday.
So the plan does have stormwater management associated with it. There's some underground treatment and some other elements on the site that'll deal with post-construction stormwater.
Good. Well, if we don't have other questions on the site, maybe we can move back to the building. I think there were a few comments. One of the questions I had, I don't think you've made a decision yet whether it's all senior housing or not. Is that true?
Well, we're doing 14. And the staff, 25% of the 57 total units got to be senior housing to get the 45 feet height.
Yeah, right.
So 14 units are going to be senior housing, low to moderate senior housing.
I thought there's some discussion that you may do more than that, too. I mean, I'm not...
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure what the owner's going to do, but you have to do a minimum at least 14.
Okay. I think it was in the staff's report because it affects the school impact fee.
Impact fee, right, yes.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. And again, this isn't, I don't think it really affects much on that. I'm just curious because, again, it wasn't clear. Is this rentals or condominiums?
Could be all rentals.
Okay. Yeah. There was a comment on the bike storage that wasn't really any secure bike storage. I mean, it's in the parking garage, but open.
Okay. Is that the west side? That's the north side.
South.
I guess on the south side of if you look at this L-shaped building, we have pretty good two banks of bike storage there. And we have some extra storage by when you come on off Riverside Avenue, and we come in the garage door off to the left, you have more bike storage there. And then on the east side, by the garage door, we have some more bike storage over there.
Yeah, I don't think it was the number. I think the staff was just interested in seeing them as some sort of more secure.
Secure?
Yeah.
I mean, either.
Objection to that?
I think the one in the back or the one by Riverside Avenue, we can enclose that.
Okay.
And make it more secure if we have to. We can definitely do that.
Okay.
I think that was the implication in the comments
Okay.
there. And one of the other comments, I was going through the building, I'm just trying to follow the plan here. The north, south, east, west, a little confusing sometimes on the plan because of the angle. The play area, I guess they call it, it's really the southeast side of the building.
Yeah.
Is the access to that adjacent to the elevator? How does one get to that?
What do we have? This is first floor.
I know that some units have access there, but
Yeah, we don't show a door, but it does show it on the site plan.
Okay, that's a coordination issue.
So we got, they kind of come together there in the lobby. There's
yeah,
supposed
so
to be a door there.
There is a door there.
And also,
Okay.
just adjacent to the elevator, there's a common room area that has access out from the play area from there as well.
But there is a door next from
Yes.
the open lobby area out.
Yes.
Okay, that was just, I thought there was, but it wasn't in the plan.
Yeah. It's chosen on site, but we don't show it on architectural.
Yeah. Sort of going through both of these. And one other comment is, and this is, I guess everybody's, not everybody, but a lot of times people aren't real wild about vinyl siding.
Right.
I know it's economical.
Right.
That's why we put it on the back.
Right. Well, we put on the back, and we talked to you back in 13, you mentioned that, well, we don't want the manufactured sidings or like casing or anything like that, so we agreed to do better AZAC trimming, corner boards, the corner trim, water table boards to kind of spruce up that back. And I think we submitted an elevation of that back showing some window details to kind of make
Right.
it a little bit more.
With metal siding and brick on the street side. And
Yes, yeah, all the sides visible from, I think there's 1, 2, at least 3 sides from Riverside is going to be brick and metal siding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get out of my thing here.
Well, I did notice in the staff comments that it seems like we've addressed this, that we needed an updated water capacity letter, and it looks like we do have that.
Yeah, we
That
got
was the
that.
most recent submission.
It was received today.
And I guess, again, this may be, this is probably one of the conditions, is to clarify the amount of area given to senior housing.
Yep.
'Cause I think it's
I-
slightly more than one floor, is that what it was?
That's correct. The area dedicated to senior housing must equal or be greater than the area that's achieved through the height bonus. And Steve has provided an annotated floor plan for the 3rd and 4th floors to identify the senior units.
Okay. And there's a comment about a revision of the lighting plan.
Vision lighting plan?
Revision of the lighting plan, that I think along the, I think it exceeded on the one boundary. So again, that'll be one of the conditions of approval.
Okay.
Yeah, external lighting?
Yeah.
Site lighting?
External lighting relative to shadow or a lighting spill over the boundary line, within 20 feet of a boundary line. There's a limited measurement, and some of those are hot. Now, it's difficult because you have an enormous right-of-way in
Right.
front of your building, so that your photometric may be picking up existing street lights anyways, but we're not wanting to have light levels too high, 20 feet beyond the boundary line.
Right, I saw there was a condition of approval that we check that post-construction, and I
Yeah.
think that, and we'll double check it obviously before we go to construction, but we'll abide by that condition.
Okay. It took you halfway through the review to pull out the nice rendering.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
rent.
rendering,
We were talking about the building, I want to see it.
Yeah, I know, it's. Okay, I would just, and is there any rooftop equipment? You don't have any HVAC equipment shown on the ground or on the roof?
I think we're proposing to put everything in the parking garage right now.
In the parking garage?
Yeah, we have a mechanical room on the right side. You pull in the parking garage on the right-hand side. The mechanical unit. I'm not sure. I got to talk to the owner. We haven't got that far yet, whether we're going to have
I would imagine,
2 boilers. So 2 boilers in the mechanical room, which is in the parking garage.
doing air conditioning? So that's what
Right.
you can get submitted is going to be, because there'll probably be something on the roof for that.
Yes, yep.
Split units.
Mini splits?
Split units, just like the three President College Street one here. Oh, yeah.
I think that's, as you say, we went through this before, but it is slightly different, it seems. I mean, the outside's, some materials are different, aren't they?
No.
Are those exactly the same materials we were at
Rendering.
last time?
The rendering tools
colors.
are getting better.
Yeah, the colors change. 'Cause the middle is a little bit more bluish, and the old version is a little more
Okay.
green. So, yeah. The rendering from 5 years ago has changed.
Well, there's one comment about canopy on some of the exterior entries. Did you see it?
Canopies?
Canopies covering the entry.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we could, I mean.
I mean,
main
especially
entry-
the main entrance there.
Yep.
That's off that ramp in the center.
You okay with that, 24 inch?
Yeah, I mean, it's a recessed entryway, so,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, no problem to put a canopy there.
Okay. I think that's most of what I had. Does anybody else have any questions for the applicant at this point?
So can we clarify on 23, are we, I'm going through the last 4 or 5 4, I guess.
That was Brad's.
Just so we're clear.
That's a recommendation, it's not a requirement,
Understood. So that'll stand as written.
as a recommendation.
Should we just take it?
And I think most of the other stuff we've covered, and I haven't seen how the dumpster location and a couple other things in it, and these recommendation of DPW on the stairs.
Can we clarify on number 12? We are providing a pedestrian flashing light, and my traffic engineer wanted me to ask if we could spell that out exactly as what we're proposing, which is a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. It's not a traffic light, and I didn't.
No, it's
the use of the word signal.
Yeah. And has this been approved by DPW?
Yes.
And that's the one where you have it on both sides of the street and there's a button for pedestrian push.
Just like at Edmonds.
Yeah, yeah. I think last time it wasn't clear whether that was going to be acceptable.
Yeah, there was this, again, this project is so old that, I think early on, there was discussion about that being one that would be a different style, but we're talking about the type that everybody's familiar with now.
Actually, when this was reviewed in 2013, and you would remember, Steve, our transportation engineer was not familiar with the installation of any of those at the time, so it took a great deal of time to discuss. Now Burlington has several that have been installed, and we're used to them.
That's what I remember too, Mary.
I have a question for staff real fast. Conditions 4 and 12, can you tell me what the difference is between these two?
What the difference is between them?
Yeah, what we're trying to articulate.
Between 4 and 12?
4 and 13, sorry.
I flagged that too, AJ. I wasn't
Not sure what are they overlapping? Are they different?
Well, quite frankly, there was a dump of information last Wednesday to incorporate. I wouldn't be surprised if there is overlap.
Okay.
The sentiment is the same about having qualified people on site during a Phase 2 investigation for appropriate identification of remediation, and certainly to have the state officials involved if appropriate.
Okay.
And in that regard, one of the recommendations, I think, in the staff report is that there be a schedule of that assessment. We realize that that's something that happens. You don't want to do it until you get the approval, but it'd be good to see how long that is anticipated to take. And then, so we get an idea. And then, obviously, after that, there's remediation that needs to be dependent on what you find. But it'd be nice to see some sort of timeline on that. And I'm sure.
That would be submitted along with a zoning permit application, correct?
With what?
That would be submitted along with our zoning permit application?
Right. I mean, it'd be a condition of approval, not a precondition.
Understood. Thank you. Good. Yep.
Comments? Okay, with that, unless you have anything else you want to add?
Well, Jeremy, and I do want to comment on this, had noted that, this was the same thing, the same application that was the application was in 2012. So now we're looking 8 years past. Although the regulations haven't changed, a lot of the background has changed around the project. Like you've highlighted the difference in the traffic manuals, which we wouldn't have been aware of. Certainly there have been events in the Riverside Avenue corridor most recently that have heightened the concern of the Department of Public Works. Relative to the setback for the dumpster, that was a general standard to allow accessory buildings to be 5 feet from a property line, but there is a specific footnote for this zoning district that requires structures to be set back. So we have to go with a specific standard rather than the general standard. At the time of the review in 2012 and 2013, we had not yet reviewed any applications that asked for that, so we had no precedent. So this permit's expired, and since then, the practice of the department and the decision-making has required the 15-foot setback. So now we have established a precedent.
I appreciate that.
Certainly.
I understand that there's been a lot of time that's gone
I mean, you haven't gotten any older and neither have I, but a lot of things have changed since 2012.
I think we're all
What's 8
just
years?
smarter.
8 years is nothing.
Yeah. Okay,
7 years.
with that, we're going to close the public hearing.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have, and I think that is, we don't have anything else on the agenda?
That's it.
We're going to close the public hearing. Jeremy, what's 8?